Okay, so if you are working on transitions, this is your video. When we took our grammar check-in yesterday, transitions seem to be something that we all really struggled with. Now, transitions we've really just talked about in passing. We haven't done like a full-out lesson on them. So that's what this is going to be for us. Now, transitions really are not that difficult to spot. They're basically just words, phrases, and clauses that connect ideas together and create fluency in writing. Typically, you will see almost all transitions at the very beginning of any kind of writing piece. Okay? So, how do you find them? Look at the beginning of the sentence. Look for a comma at the end of the transition. That's like their big kind of giveaway. If you notice that there's a comma there, I know we sometimes call those our intros, okay? That's the same thing as a transition. So you want to look for things like prepositional phrases. Those ones can act as transitions if they come at the beginning of the sentence. So a preposition plus a modifier plus a noun. So it's like me saying, in the end, comma, I loved cake. Okay, so in the end would be your transition, also acting as a prepositional phrase. Okay, same thing. Infinitives can also come at the beginning as a transition. You just want to look for that comma to offset it. Other things could be adverbs, like the word thankfully or finally. Okay, they usually end in ly, and that'll give it away. Or a dependent clause that's starting with an awubis. So, like, since I went out late last night, comma, I was really tired the next day. So that first half of that would be your dependent clause, and that is going to be a transition. Okay, so let's take a look at our worksheet. You need a highlighter and you're also going to need a pencil. So our passage says, over the long weekend, Miss Renfro decided to go snowboarding. To ensure she did not embarrass herself in front of her students at Alpine Valley, she drove 3 hours to Mad River Mountain in Zanesfield, Ohio. Thankfully, the temperature was mild and the slopes were filled with fresh powder. It was the perfect day for her to learn rails. On her first run, she fell and hit her head on an icy patch. If she hadn't been wearing a helmet, she would have cracked her skull open. After a long break, she tried again. Oops, I should have changed that to friend. With her friend, Mrs. Colleton and I are using the same deck. In the end, she decided to stick to green slopes. Okay, so if we're looking at this, what I want you to do first of all is look at the beginning of each sentence. Okay, you'll notice sometimes that you'll have a comma there. If you see a comma and it's coming from the first half of the sentence, that's going to be your transition. Okay? So, over the long weekend. That's going to be a prepositional phrase. That can be a transition. So I'm going to highlight that. That's one transition. Now, I also want you above it to see if you can write down the type of transition. So I know this is a preposition. The prep phrase. Okay, so in pencil, above it, you're going to write prep phrase. Miss Renfro decided to go snowboarding. That's the last half of it. Okay, let's look at the next one. To ensure she did not embarrass herself in front of her students at Alpine Valley, she drove 3 hours to Mad River Mountain in Zanesfield, Ohio. So this is a long one, right? To ensure she did not embarrass herself in front of her students at Alpine Valley. This is all a transition. One long, big one. Okay, now there's a couple in here. The first kind that I have, to ensure. We know that that's going to be an infinitive. Okay, and I'll put brackets. She did not embarrass herself in front of her students. So then I also have in front here. So above that, I'm going to write another prep phrase. Of her students, another prep phrase, and Alpine Valley, another prep phrase. Okay, so what I'm going to have you do is go ahead and pause the video now. I want you to go through, I want you to find any of the transitions for each of the sentences. You're going to highlight your transitions and then you're going to label them above. Okay, so she did not embarrass herself in front of her students. In front, like I said, was your prep phrase. In front of her students is your prep phrase, I'm sorry, and then at Alpine Valley is another prep phrase. So go ahead and pause it, and then we'll check back in and go over them in a moment. Okay, so at this point we should have gone through and highlighted any transition. So any kind of group of words that are coming at the beginning of your sentence that's set off by a comma. So if I read my next sentence, thankfully the temperature was mild and the slopes were filled with fresh powder. So I see another comma and I see the word thankfully. That is going to be an adverb. So I'm going to write adverb above it. Let's go to the next sentence. On her first run, it's another prep phrase, and that's a transition. She fell and hit her head. If she hadn't been wearing a helmet. So, if she hadn't been wearing a helmet, that's going to actually act as a dependent clause. I'm going to highlight that. She would have cracked her skull open after a long break. She tried again with her friend, and then in the end. Okay, so you'll notice that a lot of the time they're going to show up as prepositional phrases. However, sometimes they can show up as dependent clauses, like for this one example, if she hadn't been wearing a helmet, it's a dependent clause, because you're kind of left wondering, well, what happens if she hadn't been wearing a helmet? But the rest of them, for the most part, are going to be either infinitives or prep phrases or adverbs, and you can always tell because of that comma. Okay, always look out for that comma. That's really going to be a sure giveaway. And they always come at the beginning of sentences as well. Okay, go ahead and flip this page over. I want you to go ahead and go through and practice on the other side. You're going to do the same exact thing. Read the passage, including these parts down here too. You're going to read the passage, you're going to highlight any transitions that you found, and then you're going to label them by writing them above. Okay, so go ahead and try this on your own. When you're finished with it, turn it into the tray, silent read, and update your Padlet until you're ready for your next station.